Hello, yes, students, and welcome to this short lesson on features of science. So what I would like to do is your bronze, silver, and gold. So have a go at answering these questions, pause the video, and then we'll reflect on the answers in a moment. So answer all 6 questions if you can, and then we'll go over the answers in a second. So pause the video, and then we'll go on to the next slide. So the first question is, how do you use a table of critical values? So here you choose a significance level, work out the degrees of freedom, compare the critical value to the test value. Question: what are the drawbacks of any unstructured interview? Not easy to replicate, not easy to analyze, and increased risk of experimental effects. When would you use Mann-Whitney? Ordinal data, independent measures, and it's a test of difference. What is an extraneous variable? Variables other than the IV that could have an effect on the DV if not controlled. Identify the main issues with natural experiments. Lack of control, no random allocation, possible confounding participant variables, and also hard to replicate. And lastly, what is meant by a naturalistic observation? That was, again, observation takes place in a setting where the behavior would normally occur and there's no manipulation of any variables whatsoever. So green pen your answers, add what you need to add and replace what you need to replace. Today we're looking at features of science, and our learning objective is to understand and explore the main features of science and evaluate whether psychology can be considered an actual science as well. Very simple question. This man was swallowed by a python. This is the evidence. Do you necessarily believe it? So a simple yes or no, and if so, why? But a good scientist or a good psychologist will always ask, where is the evidence? How good is it? Is there other evidence? Does it make sense? So there's a lot of questioning which goes behind any sort of accepting of any images or any statements, but there has to be evidence. It's always important to ask for evidence, and it will be incumbent upon every psychologist to ask and to ensure that the evidence that they've been given is actually factual and there's more than one proof for it. So, well, the first work done on the functioning of the human mind used introspection. Now, you should remember introspection from when you looked at the origins of psychology last year. And this essentially is a method involving a researcher sitting down and having to think about what they felt and thought about what's going on in their head. Now, psychology has moved on since then, and it's become more of a scientific method because, again, the idea of introspection is very, very subjective, and it will vary from person to person. And these concepts, these themes are the main themes in which you need to consider: empiricism, paradigm shifts, objectivity, replicability, theory construction, hypothesis testing, and falsifiability. They sound really, really fancy. However, they really are quite simple in terms, but the book does word it in a way which can be a little bit difficult to understand. What I've done, I've broken it down for you, and I still expect you to read through each one within the book itself, but I've sort of crunched it down for you. So the empirical method is, again, information gained through direct observation or experiment, not argument or beliefs. Aims to collect facts. So again, your method has to be concise and precise, and it has to be quite clear. Okay, empirical methods are going to be the main foundation to any particular study. A paradigm shift is when theories are disproved enough, and this leads to a paradigm shift. So essentially, that you have one school of thought, one belief about a particular behavior, a particular view, and there's not enough evidence for that, or there's now new evidence which disproves it. Then that paradigm shifts over onto the new theory. Okay, so it's kind of like a ongoing replacement of what people believe to be true. And so one example is the notion that people assumed the world was flat. That was an example of a paradigm. Science then caused a paradigm shift to prove that actually the world wasn't flat. So it's just, again, this constant replacing of theories which have no, don't have any basis anymore, or there's clearer evidence for a new theory which disproves the original theory. Objectivity. So again, empirical data should be objective, so not affected by any variables or the researcher. So that being said, the objective must have some element of control, and ideally you gain the most objectivity through laboratory experiments, where again you can control many variables, if not all of them, and you can try and establish some element of cause and effect. Replicability: if you repeat the experiment and the outcome is the same, it affirms the truth of the original result. So again, you need to create research which is again reliable, and also something which people can reproduce and do themselves and obtain the same results. Theory construction: facts alone are meaningless. Theories must be constructed to make sense of facts. Hypothesis testing, again, quite simple as well. Again, a good theory must have a testable hypothesis. Okay, it must have a testable hypothesis. And falsifiability: everything about science is about proving things to be false. If you can't prove something to be false, then at that particular point, then it remains true. Okay, but a scientific theory has to have the capability of being proved false, and this links to hypothesis testing. Okay, and this is one of the weaknesses of the psychodynamic approach, because it lacks in falsifiability. Everything is quite subjective, and there's not much of a scientific basis, but it's like a falsifiability becomes an issue for it in the future. What I would like you to do as your task for today is read through pages 82 and 83, and just have a go at completing these questions on the left. Okay, so again, read through each one and complete each question. And after you've done that, can you please submit your work? And that will be the end of today's session on features of science. This does mean now that we have finished research methods. For those of you who still haven't done unrelated or related t-tests, that's something which you're going to have to sort of go over on your own, as we're going to be starting biopsychology next week. And with that being said, we have a speaker coming in on Friday, which I'll go over on Show More Homework in more detail. Besides that, enjoy your weekend.